Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back, and it's been a little while. Before we begin, two things. Number one is you can find my Discord server down below in the description if you'd like to get in contact with me or hang out with some other players and stuff. We've got our own community and it's been pretty cool, and it's been a very active server lately. And second of all is I haven't fully memorized all of these Renegade items yet, so I will be using the wiki on and off throughout this video to make sure the knowledge I'm giving is correct, and I'll link all of those links down below in the description as well. Alright, so I want to talk about Renegade items. They've been out for a while. I feel like so many players have tried to use them the best we can. I think it's just a good time at this point to talk about them. But we're just going to go over these, talk about them, see what's worth getting and what's not worth getting. So first up, we have the Renegade Behemoth Blossom. I'm going to be honest, this is probably the first one that you should pick up out of all of the Renegades in the game, and that's because it is the best first turn for a 0.6, I believe. It's very good, and I've seen it in so many setups at this point. I feel like just generally it's really, really worth picking up for that reason, but I really wouldn't use this for the upgrader itself. You only get a ×9 if your ore is worth more than 20 upgrade count, and if it's worth less than that, then you get a ×30, if I'm correct. Yes. So I don't know. It's just not very good, and even then, it increases your ore size, which can just cause more problems than if it didn't. I wouldn't recommend it for an upgrader. I would totally pick this up though for the turn. It's a very, very, very good turn. Alright, second we have the Renegade Burst Refiner, and I'm not gonna lie, if you're like early game or something, this would have been pretty decent, but I think at the time that you finally get your hands on this item, it just doesn't seem to be worth it a whole lot. Now, it is an upgrader, so, I mean, if you're really struggling for whatever reason to get Centillion or something, I guess it's not terrible. It doesn't really have any crazy drawbacks or anything from what it seems like, but it's just kind of mediocre. According to the wiki, it says, normally upgrades ore by ×5, but every 9th ore is upgraded by ×12, and it will also turn the ore bright red and neon material. So it just kind of gives it a visual change to that 9th ore and a bigger upgrade. If it was generally a ×12, I feel like this would have been pretty good, but I don't really see myself ever using this with the current stats, at least for endgame or something. But if you're really struggling at around 10k and you manage to get a key, I guess, but I feel like just putting it towards something better for the long run would just be a better idea personally. Alright, next up we have the Renegade Dystopian Refiner. I'm going to be honest, this is probably another one that I won't really recommend too much. This item is based on status effects, and for the right status effects on an ore that work with it, it'll add more multiplier, so you could essentially just stack the multiplier to be quite high. Albeit, it only caps at, according to the wiki, a 42 times. That's a pretty good multiplier. The only downside, though, is that A, it's quite large, and B, you have to stack a decent amount of status effects, one of them being sparkles, which a lot of people just try not to use sparkles if possible. As well as flames, frozen, poison, and radioactive, and also just these negative status effects. So the total list is you get a 4 multiplier increase for flames, a 4 multiplier increase for frozen, 10 for poison, 7 for sparkling, and 12 for radioactive, with a base multiplier of only ×5. So you can get a ×42 if all are stacked correctly. The only really big problem I see with this is it's just going to be annoying to use. You're going to have to use like a spore or something after this, and I just don't even feel like it's worth it. Again, it's not terrible if you're going for scent or something at a really early life, but again, I feel like investing that key at that point into something better in the long run would just be so much more worth it. Alright, so this is going to be a pretty simple one to answer, but Renegade Incendium Mine is next, and honestly, this is pretty bad. It's not terrible. I actually was pretty surprised at how decent it is. It's just that it's not practical in pretty much any situation. So while I do have particles off at the moment, something I will say is this does actually still have fireproof ores, and that's one of the reasons it's really cool. If you were to get this at maybe like life 500 or 1000 or something, this would probably be pretty good actually, as it's essentially Symmetrium, but a lot better, as Symmetrium is not worth a whole lot cash-wise. This is better than it, and it also has multiple ores, as where Symmetrium only has one. These ores are worth 8 trillion every time, compared to, I believe, the billions that Symmetrium is worth. The only problem is that this item is locked behind a life 10k gate, essentially, because of the key. And at that point, you're going to have so many Symmetriums that you can make Symmetrite. And Symmetrite is better than this, because it can make multiple ores the same way this can, and it's also worth more. Get something better, I feel like. This is so, like, not really worth it. It's just not the worst thing in the game, but it's not really that... It's not that special. Definitely a skip. Get something a lot more worth it. Okay, so next up we have the Renegade Nature's Enchantment. This is actually a pretty decent one, and I wouldn't say no to picking this one up, actually. Even around 10k, this wouldn't be terrible. The reason I say that is not because of the multiplier, and while the multiplier is not bad, especially for a slipstream, capping at a times 22.5 thousand, according to the wiki, this is just really, really good for RP farming. So how the item works is the higher your life is, the higher the multiplier is, and it caps at 22,500. That's pretty good, but even then I wouldn't recommend it for that, because by the time you get there, you'll already have so many better options like Devourer of Nightmares or something that's just better for both size and multiplier probably. The only thing to really consider is that this gives a very, very high RP yield, which is 700 RP per 250 ores. So if you don't have a bunch of scarabs yet, and you maybe have a couple extra keys because you just got lucky, or even then if you just got lucky and got one and you're still really struggling to get a couple scarabs, this wouldn't be a terrible thing to throw into your RP farm if you're trying to get a decent amount of RP. And as someone who's spent a very long time RP farming and experimenting with RP farms, this is decent. I've seen a lot of people speak very highly of it, so if you're looking to get some RP, it's something to consider. I feel like I'd ultimately prefer Scarab. If you're unsure what I'm referring to Industrial Scarab. It is this item. It is objectively just the best RP furnace in the game. However, this is a very, very close second, and it's just worth picking up overall for farming. Next, we have the Renegade Neutropian Refiner, which is actually probably one of the more decent of the, like, Opian items, because I know there's 4 of these in the game. So this item does a couple things which are really cool. One of which is that if you have no negative status effect on the ore, it actually gives a times 10, which is already fairly decent, but that goes up to a times 20 if you do have a negative status effect, so like fire or poison or radioactive, something like that. Additionally, this does have a pretty cool mechanic that I feel like is worth noting on this item, which is that this item actually doesn't give any upgrade counter, or upgrade count value, however you want to phrase it. It doesn't increase that on the ore at all. In fact, if the ore has more than 6 upgrade count already, it actually subtracts 6 from it. So if you really try hard enough, you can get an ore to be worth 0 upgrade count, and you could use it in a cell, I believe, if you took advantage of this correctly, which would be pretty cool to see what this can do. So Ultimately, though, I don't really know how often I'd use it. It's cool. It's not totally useless. I wouldn't prioritize this. Get it if you have an extra key and you're already fairly late in the game, but don't spend your first key on this unless you really, really need that upgrade and you know you could use it. Next, we have the Renegade Oblivion Weaver. I really like this item visually. It's absolutely stunning. The only thing I will say, though, right now is don't pick this item up at the moment. It is currently not working as it's intended to, and I've already made the devs aware of this, and I'm hoping it can be patched at some point in the near future. However, right now it is not working the way it's supposed to, and for that reason, I'm just going to leave it out of this video, so that way I can just make a follow-up of some sort once it is working again, and we can judge it more appropriately, I guess. Okay, so next up we have the Renegade Orbital Cataclysm. This is definitely not going to be used in endgame, I can almost guarantee that. So if you're late game, like late game, you could probably already consider this one a skip. However, if you're early game, it might be decent, but you're not even going to be able to get the Renegade until mid-late game, so. But, of course, I'd like to go over the facts before we really do any evaluating. So I'm actually going to use the wiki pretty heavily for this one. It's a little complicated, but basically how it works is the first ore that goes through it, so if I was to put an ore through it right now, it would kill the ore, but it would also save what the upgrade count of that ore is. So let's say an ore went through, it's the first ore to go through, and it has 10 upgrade counter. It'd kill the ore and save that number. And then the next ore that goes through is upgraded based on the upgrade counter of the ore that went before it. But that ore's upgrade count gets saved then for the next ore, and then that ore's upgrade count gets saved for the next ore. And so basically every ore is upgraded based on the upgrade count of the ore that went before it. However, it only caps it at times 20, which is fairly low, given you also need 450 upgrades to achieve the times 20. That's very high, and I know that you can achieve that fairly easily if you really try, but it's just, that's a lot of items just for a times 20, especially a fine point item and an item of this size. I just don't think it's worth it. It's probably one of the worst ones. I don't think it's terrible, because of course it can still be used. If an item has a use, it's not terrible. But it is not worth it, is a better way to put it. There's not really any appeal right now, and maybe someday someone will find something cool with this, but I don't really see this falling into the meta anytime soon. And given it kills that first ore, I think that just makes it even harder for it to find a spot in the meta, essentially. Because the way endgame works right now is that first ore should be the one to be sold, if I'm correct. You're trying to get the first ore that spawns to be the one that goes to the furnace, so that way you could rebirth as quickly as possible. This just kills that whole idea, and it's just really large. So I don't know, I guess point is it's just not worth it. Definitely prioritize other things, but get it if you're just feeling like it, I guess. Now, this is one I've been very excited to talk about, and this will actually have its own exclusive video on the channel soon, with a couple other items, I guess. But basically, this doesn't really have a whole lot to it. I will simply just say, get it. It's very good, especially if you're missing some portables. The reason I say that is all you do is press pulse. That's it. And every ore on the base is multiplied by times 20. You could only use it once. It cannot be reset. However, that's still a free times 20 for one click. If you're already averaging like a 13-second inf setup or something, you probably don't need this. I think you already know what you're doing. But this is more useful for the people that are missing a couple portables, probably have like a 20-ish second setup of some sort, and they're like, hey, I'm really trying to get that push to 20 skips. This might be able to do that, and you could pair it with other Pulsar items just for an even higher multiplier. And overall, I would just say that this is actually one of the really good ones because, again, it's a free upgrade and it doesn't take up any space, really. I consider it a portable to an extent, but in its own weird way, I guess. It is a Pulsar, so it's not technically a portable, but you're not using it in a conveyor line. It's good, definitely worth picking up, just something to consider. So this is the Renegade Pulsar Octagnium Mine. This is probably one of the coolest items in my opinion because it does something very unique, but I just don't think it's as useful as it probably could have been in some other universe, but it is nonetheless not terrible. So the reason I say it's not terrible despite what pretty much everyone thinks is that I can definitely see a use or two for it. Definitely a pretty niche use, but a use nonetheless. So how this item works is basically when you click Pulse, it takes the highest value ore on your base and kills it, but duplicates it into each one of these stems, so you get 8 of your highest value ore instead of just 1. So it's essentially just a replicator. It's nothing too crazy. Now that can be used for kind of 1 or 2 really decent situations, and it's mostly for blaster looping in my opinion. So let's say you are blaster looping 100 ores, and you're down to your last 2 ores and one of them dies. So you only have 1 ore left, and you're still 2 suffixes away from whatever money goal you're trying to reach with your loop. You can use this, duplicate it 8 times, and send 8 very strong ores back into the blaster loop, and try to get an extra suffix or 2 out of it. It can be useful in a situation like that, but you're never going to use this for speed rebirthing by any means, and I just don't know how much it would fit in for that category. But if you're going for money-based challenges and doing things like loops with blasters and stuff, I mean, it's probably not terrible. I would consider it nonetheless for a situation like that, but I don't think it's worth picking up if you're just trying to do speed rebirths and stuff like that. Alright, so here's an item I'm very excited to talk about, and as I mentioned, I believe I mentioned this, but this will be getting its own video. That's why you can see I have 10 of them. But this is the Renegade Sinister Sepulcher. This item is the exact same as its Slipstream counterpart, which is already very OP, given you can get the original Slipstream at as low as Life 2. So what this item does is it's essentially a star. It can be looped over and over and over until the ore is worth 1 DTG. And its multiplier is insanely high. It will upgrade the ore by 10,000 times until it gets to that cap. 10,000 is very large for an upgrader. No matter what, that's an insane upgrade. And of course, though, it can't be perfect and it has to have a pretty big drawback. That drawback is that this item has a 30% chance to square root the value of the ore, essentially preventing you from getting just a very easy loop. This does take some time to loop and actually get some DTG ores because that is a very high percent. That's not even like a 10% where, you know, you'd probably have 20-30 ores within a minute or 2 at DTG. I once looped this for a couple of minutes and I came back and I had only 3 ores that managed to get that far. So this is more useful right now for challenges or for getting most ores that go through it to get a suffix-ish increase in value. I'd like to see this used more as just a one-time use upgrader rather than a loop item, I guess. But expect a video explaining how I feel about Sinister looping and actually testing Sinister looping out. because I'd like to see how viable it is. That's kind of the reason we have 10, is I'd like to see what would a Sinister Sepulcher loop setup look like. You know, is it viable? Is it worth looking into? But ultimately, I would say it's a really good item and it's worth picking up just to experiment with. But there's not really any promise that this will be used in the endgame environment anytime soon, and I just don't want you guys to feel like it's guaranteed to. It's a very overpowered item, but that drawback pretty much kills it in a speed rebirth sense. So take that information with what you will, but I think this is a good one. So here we actually have another one of the Utopian Refiner items. This is the Renegade Suitopian Refiner, and I really, really like this item. I think it's pretty cool, albeit I don't think it's very useful, because no matter what, and I'm going to hold this item accountable for it, I don't like an item that has a chance to set the ore value to 0. So essentially this item is based on chance, and it's pretty random, pretty aggressively random. There's a 10% chance that it will set the ore value to 0 through a ×0 multiplier. However, there is a 15% chance for the rest of these multipliers. A 15% chance for a ×5, a ×6, a ×7, a ×8, a ×9, and a ×10. A 15% chance each, except for that ×0, which the ×0 is a 10%. The rest are a 15% chance. So, given that there's that big 5 multiplier gap between its lowest and its highest, that's already pretty iffy, and even then a ×10 is quite low for the size of this item. I will admit, though, that of course you don't want to lose the entire value of an ore, and that 10% chance over multiple thousands of lives being done will probably be a bit more bothersome in the long run than you'd think, and I just don't know if it's worth using outside of a couple scenarios, and I definitely wouldn't encourage you using this for like a scent challenge of any sort, because again, you don't want your ore to become literally worthless in the process. It's not great by any means. I wouldn't consider it useless, but it is objectively bad, and I would not encourage picking this up, despite how much I really wish it was good. Next, we have the Renegade, the Grand Prism, and this item is probably the most safe go-to item that you should pick up, and despite the fact that it's pretty nerfed in comparison to the Slipstream counterpart, it's still not terrible, and I would not consider it bad by any means. It's a flat ×25, and it's not the largest item, given it's literally smaller than most of these items, if not about the same size. I just wouldn't say it's bad for not having any weird mechanics and just simply giving you a pretty hefty upgrade. I hope to see it maybe get a little stronger in the future, or just maybe really good in the third sacrifice, but it's not bad, and if you're struggling to find some high MPU items currently, or you're missing some event items, this probably wouldn't be bad to just throw into your setup and get some decent value out of it. As much as I really want this item to be good, it's a cell furnace, so we're gonna have to be pretty unfortunately critical here. This is the Renegade, the Great Parasite, and while I want this item to be good because I absolutely love the design, this is pretty terrible. It is a cell furnace, and there's so many better cell furnaces in the game than this. Especially ones that don't require a life 10k key to get, which is already also a decimal item in itself. But I would not use this even over like Devour, Dreamer's Anguish, even something like Nature's Grip at that point. I just don't think it's worth it. But basically, according to the wiki, this item works in the following way. base multiplier of times 7 billion, but that multiplier is increased by 7 billion every time an ore is processed to a maximum cap of 350 trillion. So basically, it starts out bad and ends up over a very, very, very long time, it ends up okay. So I've done the math, and this item requires that you send 50,000 ores into the furnace in order to achieve that max multiplier. That is genuinely insane, and no matter what, I simply don't think this item is worth using. Even if it was lower, even if it was 5,000, I just don't think I'd use this. I mean, cell furnaces like Dreamer's Anguish and Devourer, or even something like Pandora's Box at that point, is probably just something you're better off using if you're really in need of a cell furnace. And even then, there's probably normal non-cell furnaces that will do a better job than this. So I just wouldn't encourage it. It feels like the Scorpium Mine of cells, and I just don't like it. Definitely a skip, as unfortunate as it is. This is our last item in this video, and this is the Renegade Utopian Refiner. This item is simply just not worth it because of its size. It is the same size as the Grand Prism, and it is still only a ×8. Even then, it adds sparkles to the ore of random colors, so I don't really see much of a reason to use this. The sparkles are there, and then there's also just a really disappointingly low multiplier for the space that it takes up. And just given the lineup of better items that we've seen in this video so far, I feel like this is an okay item to say that you probably can skip this. But if you don't really care about the sparkles and you're in desperate need of a slight upgrade, I guess. But I really don't know in what situation you'd really use this in, other than maybe a scent challenge if you're struggling really, really bad. That's gonna be it for this video. I'm gonna edit this video right now and get this out today. I will also be streaming today, by the way, probably right after this video is edited. I am so tired. I'm gonna sleep so good after this stream today. You guys have no idea, but yeah, thanks. This was a fun one. This is actually not my first time making this video. I've just seen some things change throughout the past couple of weeks that I felt like this video was worth just redoing overall. And given that I can confirm that Oblivion Weaver is not working as intended, I wanted to include that because I didn't actually know that the first time I recorded it, so. But yes, of course, thank you guys for watching. Thank you for all the love and support on the channel. We have so much support, and I've been very happy to be doing videos. So yeah, expect some more content soon. Join the Discord. You could be the first to find out about it there, or turn on notifications and subscribe if you'd like. See you guys later. Peace out. Bye-bye.